I want to bring in Ric Grenell right now, former acting director of national intelligence, a senior advisor for us.
Look, here we go again. The State Department is leaving Americans behind. I don't understand why we evacuate the diplomats from the embassy. The embassy is supposed to be the first line to help Americans. Why are we pulling the diplomats out when they are supposed to be the ones helping Americans? And let me just say this, Jordan. I know a lot of Foreign Service officers. I've heard from many who are complaining that the diplomats are pulled out, leaving the Americans behind. This makes the State Department look incredibly wimpy. And that's not what they are there to do. They are there to help Americans, and they want to be able to stay in the embassy and help Americans. Not all these diplomats want to cut and run.
Yeah, I mean, we sent in a special forces operation, which they did their job to evacuate. That's what they do. They follow the orders, but they come in from Djibouti. They take them out. And then we get a report there's 16,000 Americans left in Sudan. But now they're downplaying the idea, well, a lot of them are dual citizens, so they're Sudanese anyway, so just let them be. I mean, Rick, that's pretty offensive to me as an American and as someone who's done a lot of work abroad like you have. Like, the fact these are American citizens. They have the same citizenship rights as you or me or anyone else, and they're downplaying their importance as if they're not fully citizens because they happen to have Sudanese heritage.
Well, John Kirby went so far as to say they don't want to get out because they're dual citizens. If you go back and you look at his interviews, he's literally saying that they because they're dual citizens, they don't want to leave. That is not true. And once again, we have John Kirby, who from the podium of the United States government is giving terrible misinformation. Remember, he's the one who stepped forward during the Afghanistan time saying that everything was fine in Afghanistan. The pictures we could see that wasn't true. He's the one who said, we've got the terrorists. We struck back against the terrorists in Afghanistan. That wasn't true. We actually did not hit the terrorists. We hit children. And all of the media in Washington just regurgitated dutifully the pronouncements of government officials. We need to have a skeptical media. We need people to be able to hold these bureaucrats to account. What they're saying from the podium is not true. Americans want to get out of Sudan. And what the Biden team did is evacuate all the diplomats at the embassy. No one's there to help them.
You know, that's what I mean. You feel like those are the people that they're supposed to be there to assist the people in need, especially citizens. These are just allies, people that assisted the U.S. And it's been a bad situation there for years. It's not like this should have been that. It seems like another intelligence failure.
It does.
Like, why did the U.S. have no idea, act like we had no idea that this was about to crumble?
You know, Rick was mentioning Admiral Kirby, John Kirby, and let's just be honest, Rick, this guy's not exactly a confidence builder. Now, he's only got the information that they give him, but he does not give, as we say in diplomatic speak, confidence-building measures when he gets to the podium. He just doesn't. I think one of the things that we're seeing is and you know this from your diplomatic work and also your work as DNI, exit strategy as important as entrance strategy. How you get out of a situation to leave it in a more stable environment is as important as how you engage it. I think of the Middle East. Under your team, when you were in office as a member of the cabinet, we end up with the Abraham Accords. It was going to be the Saudis were the next one. I know this. Well, the Saudis were the next one that were going to sign it. Now they're in cahoots with Iran and Russia. Why? Because the United States entry and exit strategies are so upside down.
Look, there's not a single country around the world that is in better shape because of the Biden administration. I could list so many problems around the world that are getting worse. And, this is a big black eye for the State Department, a department that I care very deeply about. And my colleagues, my former colleagues there at the State Department, are horrified that their reputation is being sullied by these decisions where you go in, you take all of the diplomats, you get them out, and you leave Americans behind. This is outrageous. And, Congress and the media should start pushing back and holding the Biden administration to account.
It seemed like, too, this was another failed opportunity. So you had this overthrow of Bashir in 2019. Things are messy when there's overthrow. So there's a couple of military groups at stake here. And yet we haven't been able to seize on that moment. And I guarantee that the line from the State Department will likely be, unfortunately, as we've seen that they think it's working, Rick, is we'll just blame the Trump administration. And so I wouldn't doubt that that's going to be what we hear today, is they're just going to say, you know what, it got messy because Donald Trump put us in this spot.
No, and the opposite is true. I mean, you look, first of all, we have to be clear. George W. Bush, his administration did some great work in Sudan. I mean, I've been working on the issue of Sudan since 2003. I worked for John Danforth, who was the presidential envoy for Sudan. I worked with Rich Williamson, who was the presidential envoy for Sudan. I actually ran all of the public affairs strategy on the issue of Sudan out of the UN office for Ambassador Rich Williamson. And so we've had a series of successes. We stabilized the area. And don't forget this, there are 12 peacekeeping operations of the UN, blue helmeted peacekeeping operations. 2 of them are Sudan. One is Sudan and one is South Sudan. And that is because the country was split into 2 to help bring about peace. We are spending more than $1.4 billion every single year through the UN to help the people of Sudan and South Sudan. The American taxpayer pays 25% of that. The Biden administration over the last 3 years completely ignored it. We should also say that Susan Rice, who was the Assistant Secretary of State for Africa in the Bill Clinton administration, has been inside the White House, intimately involved in all of these policies. She announced today that she's leaving. In the wake of Susan Rice is also Sudan chaos and a whole bunch of other issues that are in chaos.
Yeah, it's always her timing, her entry. We talk about entries and exits. She's always got an interesting timing too. It's like as things start hitting the fan,
you first wonder if is she going to go to work for the campaign because Biden's going to supposedly announce tomorrow. But
then there's
knows?
Another failed state.
Yeah, I mean,
in their wake of their strategy. I mean, these were countries that tried to do the right thing, get rid of the bad guy, wanted by the world for genocide. Yep. So help us out, and they need help to structure. And they got rushed into a civilian government that we didn't support that government. It fell. There's 2 military factions. As Rick's talking about, the Christian community is broken off in Sudan into a place that's safer for them. But if you read about, they're highly critical of them too. But they've only been running a country for a few years.
You know,
it's not going to be a pretty perfect thing.
No, and that's, again, the lack of strategy.